Hello, word nerds! Happy Sunday, and welcome to our YA Heyday chat, where we're going to be looking back on some of the books and series that kind of made YA what it is now, and the glory days of reading as I kind of look back on them when community was crazy strong and everyone was talking about the same books, and it was all just very exciting, and it was like the one time it felt really cool to be a person who read books a lot. So, to kick things off, we're going to talk a little bit about which books we kind of consider to be part of the YA Heyday, and I'm going to let Kyra kick us off here rather than pretend it's a question.
Yeah, Kelly and I got talking a little in the pre-chat, and she wanted to start with this idea. So when she asked me this in the pre-chat, my initial reaction was The Hunger Games and Twilight. Like, those are the top two that come to mind for me as like Heyday books. But then when I thought about it more, in some ways it actually feels like those were the books that opened the door for the Heyday. So for me, I think actually maybe it's like those books came out and they were huge blockbusters. And then in the next like 5-6 years, we saw a ton of stuff that was like very much in that realm. Like, you know, we got Vampire Academy and other vampire supernatural books. We got other dystopians that all kind of flooded in after that. But I think for me, yeah, so those, a couple like really pivotal series opened the door, and then we just had like lots of stuff that maybe never got quite as popular as The Hunger Games or Twilight, but that was still very popular, at least within the book world. So I'm thinking like Daughter of Shadow and Bone, or now I'm forgetting all the ones I was talking about, but yeah. Those are my thoughts.
Shadow and Bone and Daughter of Smoke and Bone.
I just kind of out of curiosity pulled up a list on Goodreads of the like one of their most popular YA books. And the top ones are kind of what you'd expect. Harry Potter's on there, which is a weird one because it kind of straddles the line between middle grade and anyway. But then it's The Hunger Games is the second one, and then The Fault in Our Stars by John Green, Divergent.
Oh yeah.
And then we get a couple older ones: The Book Thief, The Giver, Perks of Being a Wallflower. City of Bones was right in that time frame. Maze Runner is a dystopian. That one's right up there. There's a couple other older ones: The Outsiders, A Wrinkle in Time, The Selection, Eleanor and Park, Cinder, Throne of Glass, Fangirl, Vampire Academy, Red Queen. And if you look at that, like there's some, to me that's almost like two categories of book. Like there's some like classics like from quite a bit older, and then it's like books that came out within like a 4 or 5 year time frame.
Yeah, because the classic ones are all the books you think of when you think what was YA before the category existed. I'm really interested because you mentioned like The Hunger Games and Twilight and feeling like those kind of opened the door, and then that the door closed in 5 or 6 years, which to me is like, did the door just close when those series ended? Because like those books, like Twilight had 4, Hunger Games had 3, but I think it took more than 3 years to come out.
Yeah, I was looking at Mockingjay came out in 2010.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my own rant about what I think. After it
and I think there definitely was still some YA heyday after Hunger Games ended.
All of the Clockwork books.
And Divergent and The Fault in Our Stars. And
who's the Throne of Glass author?
Sarah J. Maas.
Not Throne of Glass, the City of Glass.
Cassandra Clare.
Cassandra Clare. I can't believe I forgot her name.
Yeah, see, I think like Throne of Glass was 2012, Clockwork Angel 2010, Fault in Our Stars was 2012, Maze Runner, so that was a little closer to The Hunger Games, but it does seem like there was like it didn't just end when those.
No, it wasn't a hard stop.
No, especially because like going like Hunger Games to Divergent. Like there had to be time for publishers to pick up and publish the like we're trying so hard to recapture the Magic series. Okay, I'm also thinking about why was it that like Twilight and the Hunger Games publishers tried so hard to like we want more vampires. We're gonna do so many vampires. We want dystopian. We're going to do so much of that. But it was like a hard no with Harry Potter. And like, I know we're putting Harry Potter in a weird place, but everyone was like, you cannot do magic schools. Harry Potter has done it. No one else may do it. But Twilight and Hunger Games, everyone's like, let's do this, but just slightly different forever. Like, why was that?
Yeah.
I feel like actually I don't know, there were some hard lines with Harry Potter where it's like, we cannot do magic school. We cannot, like, things that I think made it too close. And again, I don't know why that was, like, why we drew those lines. I do feel like there was more of an attempt in middle grade to kind of recapture that. I feel like there's a lot of middle grade from that time period that.
Yeah, I think like a full like subgenre of dystopian or even like vampire supernatural stuff is maybe different than like the like specifics of like you can't do a magic boarding school.
Yeah, but I feel like if you extrapolate Harry Potter, it's magic kids in a magic place, and in some ways it's like Percy Jackson isn't not that.
Yeah.
You know, like I think like Brandon Mole books, or like to me that felt like a little less directly like, oh, we're trying to capture Harry Potter magic. But I do. And
I'm not saying that like it didn't happen, but I felt like in like trying to publish books around then, there was like a hard, you do not do this rule that didn't exist in the other places.
Yeah, I remember even in 2011 or whatever, 2012, when I came back to writing seriously, it was like, don't even bother doing a school. Like, don't put it in a school. Just don't.
And I do think as big as Twilight and Hunger Games were, they were not at the same magnitude of Harry Potter as well. And Harry Potter was longer. It was 7 books and 8 movies, where like Hunger Games, they knew they only had 3 books and 4 movies. So like if they wanted to continue selling dystopians, they needed other books. So that might have had an influence on it too.
Well, like by the time the final Harry Potter movie came out, like we've been doing that for like 20 years.
We've been done for a while.
Like,
I don't even want to look out how long ago just even the final movie was. It's all going to make me feel old.
I think this whole chat might make me feel old.
I do think too there was an element of the industry tapping into kind of what had existed already in the romance genre, which romance was a huge part of everything coming out back then. It was like hard to find something that didn't have a heavy romantic element. And in romance, it's always, you got the formula, so now let's put it in a bunch of different hats and see what happens.
It is interesting because I do think that when I think of like the 2013 to 2016 YA, there was like fantasy was so big. They were doing so much in fantasy. And that is maybe a little less obviously inspired by, like, I can't think of, again, I think of Harry Potter more as middle grade, even though it's stretched into some YA age stuff. But I have a hard time thinking, like, was there a that I'm just forgetting the fantasy, I guess, the Cassandra Clare books, and there's like some supernatural stuff, but there was also a lot of high fantasy coming out. And I don't know that I can think of like a blockbuster title for YA fantasy from that era.
I don't think so.
Like there was stuff that was popular, like Throne of Glass, Shadow and Bone.
Shadow and Bone was probably the closest.
Yeah, because like I guess it felt like high fantasy felt denser than the kind of like Aragon comes to mind, but those are like big books. They're really not for everyone.
Yeah, I think fantasy generally is considered kind of less accessible.
But it was like really big in YA for a few years. Like when you went to the YA section, it was kind of dominating. It was getting really big advances and. Just a quick hello to everyone in the comments who's jumping into this chat with us. And Andrew had said, I would argue somewhere around the last of the YA blockbuster movie adaptation was kind of the end, which I think makes a lot of sense.
I was just looking it up, and Mockingjay Part 2 came out in 2015, and that makes sense to me. Because like the first Divergent movie came out in 2014, and those movies like fizzled out. And I feel like, that was kind of the sign of the times.
Was like in 2015, publishers were still acquiring it pretty heavily and giving like really big advances to a lot of series and stuff that then did not end up earning out because the public had it was maybe a little oversaturated by that point. So I feel like there were still a lot of books coming out. And at least from a publishing standpoint, I don't know that I felt the contraction until closer to like 2018, 2019.
I think I felt it before then, because I remember going on Sub in 2016 and it being like, this is a ghost town.
Because I feel like that was like the contemporaries were like really picking up at that point in time.
Yeah,
Like,
the John
Fault in Our
Green
Stars
era.
had gotten so popular, that it was getting harder to sell fantasy.
Yeah.
Everyone was complaining about trilogies.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What a weird thing to complain about.
I know more.
Like, we had it so good, and we just had no idea.
Yeah, I do think around the John Green time was when, as an industry, we were like, okay, we, as if we have any control in this industry, but like the industry itself was like, how do we catch that again? Because we've now done it a few times, so you would think you could track it. And just learning for a decade after that you can't.
Yeah. I think like sick lit was the last like YA trend that like tried to like catch on.
Tried to make it
a very
bummer.
interesting choice. Because I remember there was like several like books that were like Times of the Fault in Our Stars were very similar.
There was that Cole Sprouse movie and book.
Yeah, 5 Feet Apart.
Yeah.
And then there was Meet Earl and the Dying Girl, which was another one. And then I don't know if you guys like at that same time, like TV trends were like very much trying to pick up on like what the book market was doing. So there was the Red Band Society that lasted for all of one season.
Yeah.
That was like it was about like the pediatric cancer ward. Like that was the whole show. So that was like I remember that coming out, and I was like, oh yeah, that genre is about to like die. Like,
I think that was the same time too that Julie Murphy's first book came out, which was like a twist on the sicklet trope, where she like finds out she's no longer sick, and she like thought she was gonna die. Side effects may vary. That's what it was called.
I have that one.
How long was the Vampire Diaries on? Because I feel like that outlived
It's on for a long time.
forever.
I mean, technically, isn't the Vampire Diaries still going off and on TV?
I mean, they were on like their third
Spin-off.
spin-off a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2017 is when it concluded.
Yeah, like that
Mm-hmm.
lived for a while. Well, and it concluded, and they did the originals like right after that in the same universe.
Nina Dobrev was done like a few years before that.
Right, yes.
So she knew.
That was the time that she was in the show, but like she wasn't in the show.
Yeah.
For, like, 3
Because she
seasons.
and Ian Somerhalder had like broken up, and
Oh yeah.
speaking of
YA,
YA, speaking of YA Heyday, I did not know he was married to the actress who played Rosalie.
I know. I was very shocked when that popped up on my TikTok. I was like, "Oh my god, what?"
Who's
They've
married
been together for like 11 years or something.
The actress who plays Rosalie
Mhm.
in Twilight is married to what's his character? in Vampire
Ian
Diaries?
Somerhalder.
Ian Somerhalder.
Wow.
Damon?
Damon.
No.
Yeah,
Yeah, Damon.
Small world.
that's so funny.
Right.
Why have they never like told us before?
Right.
Like,
Nicole asked an interesting question. Do you think the rise of the MCU had anything to do with it? People weren't looking to novel adaptations, but to superhero films instead.
I honestly don't know. Like, it was such a weird phenomenon of just like everyone was loving books, and then we were done.
Yeah. I could
Yeah,
see
for
like
me,
that
it's-
became the big thing.
I actually feel like my MCU phase and my YA, I mean, I still read a lot of YA, but like my heyday of reading it were kind of concurrent. I think the first Avengers movie came out in 2010, 2012.
I think it was 2012.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Googling all these movie dates. Yeah, 2012.
And I feel like, yeah, from like 2012 to 2014, 2015, I was a young 20-something who watched a lot of Marvel and read a lot of books, YA books. So
I remember talking back then about how like superhero stuff was big, but it didn't really translate to books well,
Mm-hmm.
and how it was like harder to find a really good superhero novel since it's so cinematic.
Because like a couple people tried and they just never
A
really
lot of
took
people
off.
tried.
I wish I had caught on. Like, I always think of the Gone series when someone says like superhero book, because Gone by Michael Grant, like all the kids get powers. They're like not superheroes, but like it's pretty close to like what a superhero book movie would be. There's heroes and villains, and you know, the people without powers have opinions about the people with powers, and like that's the only one I could think of that like even did kind of well.
I'm curious.
Renegades.
Yeah,
I
Renegade.
remember
Yeah.
like Brandon Sanderson's superhero series was like interesting. I think I only read one of the books, but which maybe says something for why those didn't catch on. That I was like, oh, this is a good book. Not interested enough to read more of this. I'm curious, are there any YA books from this time period that you're like surprised have never been adapted? Because I was just thinking about like Marie Lu's Legends series. It's
Yeah.
ever.
Oh, that would make such a good TV series. No.
For that matter, I don't care that it isn't, but Throne of Glass.
I know it's like been in the works for so long and has not actually happened. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if it does eventually. Like, it could be one of those things that, because Sarah J. Maas is so popular now, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they go back and adapt that too.
I do feel like it's one of the ones that like will probably eventually get adapted, and it probably won't be good and won't be successful. It won't
I
make it
feel
go
like
on.
her Court of Thorns and Roses or whatever is more likely to be adapted right now.
It's like in the
I feel
works
like-
right now. Where
I feel
HBO
like-
has the rights.
Both
Really?
series are like likely to happen and people will be excited about them. I think my worry is I feel like no studio will put enough money behind either of them, and because like it's high
It'll have
fantasy,
that
it
like
needs,
sad way.
it needs like Game of
budget.
Thrones budget level, and it won't have Game of Thrones budget level, and so
I think they'll give it the Bridgerton treatment. Like,
yeah.
I
That'll
think it
be
has the
smut.
potential with HBO being the one behind the project. I think anywhere else, like having, actually, I'm not 100% sure if that's actually true. That could have been just something I heard. But I think HBO has the rights to Avatar. So that's the only studio I would think could even get close to giving fans what they want. But honestly, like, it's such a popular book series. Like, people are going to be mad. Like, people are going to be mad regardless of who does it, how they do it, who's casted, what happens in the adaptation. Like, someone's going to be mad. People are going to be mad.
It's Hulu has the rights to Court of Thorns and Roses.
couldn't happen to a more deserving series.
That's gonna get like the CW treatment. I feel like.
I feel like that would be generous. I feel like the CW treatment would be okay.
That's so funny.
I think for me, The
I
Selection
know.
is the one I want a movie of.
Ooh, yes, I'm so
Yeah.
sad.
I've
it's never
tried so
happened.
many times to adapt it. Have you
I'm
ever seen
sad.
like the unaired CW pilot?
I want to watch.
No.
Oh my gosh,
God,
you
they
have
did
to watch
that.
it.
I've seen the really bad script, like the other one with like the really bad script.
There's only I think like 8 minutes of it that were ever released of like the unaired selection pilot, but like
Yeah.
it
like,
was
even
just
even if it one day ever got made, I'd always be sad that we missed out on like William Moseley in it because he would have been so good.
Mm. I remember watching the pilot for Delirium because they were going to make an adaptation of that one by Lauren Oliver, and they released the pilot, and I was pretty excited. I liked that series a lot. I thought it had like for the time, a really unique ending and stuff. And then they put the entire first book in the pilot, the whole first book. And then it never got picked up because what would the show have even been?
Yeah.
I know Netflix is done with The Uglies. And they're just like sitting on it. Yeah, Joey King is in it.
Yeah.
She plays the main character.
I love
I
that book
forgot about
series
that.
so much.
Yeah.
I love The Uglies. I thought it was so good. I am worried about like how an adaptation would go. Like I feel like also it's been so long that like it would probably be good. Like, does anybody remember the plot exactly? Like,
And maybe that's more like what we need to
Vaguely.
get back to, of like less studios trying to capture audiences from popular series and more like taking source material and making a good adaptation. And I didn't realize that was originally a book. Those kind of things where like they do a good job with the story, but aren't like trying to grab the YA audience that forgot about it 10 years ago.
Yeah. And Uglies was like pre-Heyday. It's pre-Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It gained popularity around that time, like because people were looking for more of the same like dystopian.
The one I would want, and I think could be wonderful only if it got a Game of Thrones budget, is Daughter of Smoke and Bone. Of just like how beautiful that story was, and how like epically, like it's such a visual. Like you can't put a teal wig on somebody; it has to be pretty. Like,
to this day, I think that's my favorite magic system. Like I haven't read a book that has a magic system that beats that. It's just so unique. Like the books. Now I want to reread it. It's so good.
Originally thinking of asking us an opening question of like, what is your to this day favorite YA Heyday series book, whichever.
Oh.
Do we have like a definitive? What is the end of the Heyday that we're counting?
2015, maybe. Said that was the last Mockingjay movie. So
yeah,
mine is easy. I'm rereading it right now. I just finished Catching Fire tonight, and this series holds up so well. Like it really does. Just as good as I remember it being. Oh my gosh.
It's definitely like the big series, Hunger Games, for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like if I'm not gonna pick like Hunger Games or Twilight, I'm trying to think of another book like series that like had my brain like so encapsulated. And recently I've been thinking a lot about the Maximum Ride series. Because I was super into Maximum Ride for a minute. Like that's an adaptation I wish they did one. It was horrible. It was real bad. It was like on sci-fi. Like it didn't go anywhere. So like I really like that, but I don't think that like is the most like popular. But like for me, I've read a lot of the books multiple times.
But like Kyra's definition of Heyday, of like all of the books that got to exist because of the big titles, I don't think anything like came close to the Raven Boys for me. Like that was the one.
Yeah.
I was just trying to think. I like a year or two ago wanted to like try and nostalgia reread some things. And I only ended up rereading like 2 books. One of them was Six of Crows, which is a 2015 book. So again, kind of a little at the end of that time frame. And then the other was actually a 2016 book, The Winter's Curse. Which, yeah, like I loved that book. It held up on the read through. I was like, oh yeah, this slapped. I'm like, as we're talking, I'm not getting a whole lot of like nostalgia that makes me want to like go reread any of these things, except for the selection, which I feel like I could go reread.
Yeah.
Oh man, I have just like vivid memories of me and one of my friends who was also really into the selection book, and we would just talk about it during our free time in Latin because that was like the one class that we had together. And I remember we were just talking about like how much like America was annoying us. I think we were both reading the second book at that time, and someone was like, "You guys are like so unpatriotic," and like we just like almost fell out of our desks like laughing so obnoxiously loud, and like that's what I always associate the selection with. Like, I loved the series. But
yeah, I think
that's the thing I miss most about the Heyday is like just talking to other people about like everyone's reading the same thing or has read the same thing.
Yeah. And I miss like because I remember the selection. Like I read that entire series in like a 3-day weekend.
Yeah, same.
You know, like
I think the same 3-day weekend.
Those books that I just like sat and read the whole thing all at once because it was so gripping. And then like went and talked to people.
Sorry, just remembered Matched. That was another one that I like read.
Oh yeah.
I was thinking about Matched. I ended up DNFing the series. Maybe I'll go back.
The second
I finished it. The third one was a little better than the second one, but it took a weird turn. it got like viral, I think. Not like internet viral, but like a viral infection.
Oh, yeah. I heard that. That was probably one of the book series that had one of the most unique like concepts and the like most unique premise that like did not pay off. Like the first book was really good and the world building was really, really compelling. And then it just completely fizzled out at the second book. I was like, what is this? What am I reading right now?
And I feel like that was a problem. That was part of the reason that dystopian died off, is that we started having a lot of really high concept first books where you could tell the author didn't know where to take it from there, because everyone was just trying to come up with that like really big concept that would get people to pick it up.
And also getting boxed into trilogies after that. Like,
Yeah.
This is crazy concept that maybe we should just let book series be the length that makes sense for the book series and not try to make them trilogies 5 years, 10 years ago. Now you can't get a trilogy to save your life, even if your story needs it.
Yeah.
Nope.
I just remember too, like for me, obviously, I think The Raven Voice is the only one I reread regularly, but Twilight was the first book that I had recommended to me by like a random, because Emma and I, we grew up together, so we were always sharing book recommendations. But I was just like, I have such a strong memory of we were in math class and we were in these portable classrooms because the school wasn't big enough for all of us. And I heard this one girl who I was like kind of friends with through band, and she was like talking to some other people, and she was like, you guys got to read this book. It's called Twilight. And I was like, people here are reading? And obviously people there were reading, but I'd never heard people just like talking about a book in a public place like that. And so I immediately was like, Mom, we got to go to Barnes and Noble. Like, we got to get this book. And like, yeah, it's just such a happy memory for me. If my vampire books ever gets published, like, her name's Megan also, and she's going in the acknowledgments of my book. It's like such a happy memory.
Without her, you never would have found out about.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
How would I have heard about it any other way?
Never.
I was like a late-ish adopter of the Twilight. I didn't start reading it until after the first movie had come out. But I was really into vampire books already. I had been in the middle of like the Vampire Kisses series by Ellen Schreiber, which I don't know if any of you guys were into those books. They don't hold up. I tried to reread them again, like only a couple years after I was like super into them, and then I was like, "What am I reading?" And then there's like 12 books or something. That's obnoxious. And like I skipped to the end because I was like, "What happens in the end?" And it ended. But I saw the first Twilight movie, and it was like at like Thanksgiving time, because they always came out like in November. And I begged my aunt to take me and my cousin to the bookstore because she always bought us books. And I bought like the first 3, and I read them so fast. Like, yeah, it was bad how fast I read them. I remember reading the book, and I almost died because I did not eat, sleep, drink for like at least 48 hours while I was like reading the book. And then my best friend was like, "Hey, do you want to go ride bikes?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then I passed out in the street. So, you know, we really should have known I had ADHD before I was an adult. Like, I'll say that.
The signs were there.
The signs were there.
On the topic of vampires, the ones that I probably have reread more than, I would guarantee I reread it more than Raven Cycle, is Vampire Academy. For me, that was like a foundational, I love this shit. The story stands up to me. I will still reread it. Fantastic. Both adaptations would be heartbreaking. It'd be bad.
I read that one years after the fact. I wish I had read it like when it was big, like when it came out, because I feel like I would have been obsessed.
I tried to read it like 5 years ago, and I was like, "This is her teacher. This is her teacher."
Yeah, it does not hold up.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I would have not minded at all as a teen because I didn't know, but as an adult, it was hard to get over.
I feel like if I were an adult that read the series for the first time, I would have been like, "What? We're not doing this." But like as like a middle schooler, I was like, "It's okay," because he's only like I think he was like 4 years older than her or something. Like they tried to make it okay a lot of times. But yeah, I agree with Kelly. I think the series really holds up. I've reread it a couple times.
You have to be able to get
Okay,
past that though. So like
Yeah.
loving it already does help.
Yeah, you do have to kind of.
But it
get
become
over
one
that
of the
mental
best
hurdle.
like court intrigue series of ever. Like it starts so romance and gets so deep in terms of like world building and politics and all of that. And those are the ones that I love.
Yeah, I wish we had an adaptation that did it justice.
It's so sad.
Yeah, I haven't seen the newest one, but I also remember being like they changed Dimitri to be a student in the newest one, and I was like, nope, I won't watch it. Don't like it. I was like, you can't do it. So much of the relationship is built off the fact that he's like a mentor is creepy and not okay as it is. It does really shape their dynamic. So I was like, I don't know how they're gonna do this.
I feel like we're kind of transitioning into something I wanted to talk about, which is like things that have aged well, things that haven't aged well with looking back.
The writing of Twilight. I could not put that book down once upon a time, and
I
now I
still
cannot
don't
pick
get
it up.
Yeah, I tried to reread it at one point, and I was like, how did I get through this? It's funny that like the writing has not held up, but like the story, people like it's had a renaissance. Like people love it again.
Yeah. I have reread it like 5 or 6 years ago, and like I was able to get through all the way up until we hit the Jacob POV in the last book, and then I gave up. And yeah, I knew it was written horrifically the whole time. I was like, this is so bad. I gotta keep reading though, because there are things I've forgotten in this series. It's
I agree.
So bad.
I've tried to reread it. I tried really hard to reread it once. I was like determined. I was like, I'm gonna reread this book. Like nothing's gonna stop me. I was even like annotating it, but like it really just devolved into me like making fun of the book and the margins. And like I could not get past like the first like couple of chapters. I get to the blood typing scene like that day where like Bella leaves early in the book every single time, and I'm like, oh my god, I don't want to read this.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I also watched all the movies, and I felt like the movies held up more than the books did. Because I think all the actors knew what they were making, and they knew what it was.
Okay, so thinking about like the creepy age gap in Twilight, I think it's part of why the like mentor relationship in Vampire Academy was like okay enough to me. Of like all of the other vampire books were so much creepier in terms of like age disparity and power dynamics and all of that. Of like, oh, he is equal to her in species and only slightly older. This is fine, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, what was wrong with? I think paranormals still do this. There just aren't as many paranormals coming out. But it was like, wow, so if their age is infinity, we're just pretending like it's the same, right? That's weird.
If they were frozen at that age, it's fine.
It's fine.
Nicole brought up The Host by Stephanie Meyer. It's really bad.
I forgot about The Host.
Did that really happen? Because I remember reading it as well, but I don't remember enough about it. I liked it.
I watched the movie not that long ago and like ended up looking back up the book again, and it was like, what? That's how she ended it?
How did it end? Remind me. What happened?
I can't remember all the details, but they basically like take her and put her in like a girl, right? They put her in a girl.
Yeah, another person who just like wasn't, but like they made it okay because it was like a human that like wasn't coming back into their body after the like parasite alien
And
species.
she was really
they're
young.
like, oh, it's fine.
And he like looks at her and she's super young and he's like, but it's fine because she's not really.
Huh.
No. Super weird.
It was also just a very white and heteronormative
Very.
time out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, like think about what held up, and like so much of it is like things that as a society we're talking about. These things aren't okay now. Versus like the Hunger Games, like what that was formed out. We're still very angry at the government, so it still works.
Yeah, I think Hunger Games really, really holds up. Well, I just like listened to the audiobook at the end of December, and it was so good. Like I forgot how good Hunger Games is. Catching Fire has always been like my favorite sequel to the book, and probably to this day I can't think of a better sequel.
So good.
It's so well done.
Mm-hmm. Cannot think of a better book 2 in a trilogy. Like usually book 2 was like the one that fell flat, but
flip,
it's so good.
No, Catching Fire, like honestly, I think it's better than Hunger Games in some points. But like it's really hard to say that because there are some things in Hunger Games that are just so good. And I also forgot how absolutely horrifying the Hunger Games books actually are. Like they are intense.
Yeah, rereading those is like, because I haven't tried it, and I'm planning to soon. But like being more of an adult now, whereas I was relating to the children before, I'm now like, oh no, they're just killing small children. This is so much worse than anything I ever.
Yeah, it's like in Catching Fire when they talk about Finnick, and they talk about how like he won the games at only 14 years old, and he won 10 years ago. And so you realize like in Catching Fire, Mockingjay, he's only like 24. Like he's still a kid practically.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
No. I think those books have almost even gotten better with time. It's like reality TV is even more a part of our lives now than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And I think as an adult, you can pick up on even more of like the things she's making commentary on in our society that you like miss out on.
Yeah.
As like a teenager. Yeah. There's, like I said, they're just so good.
One thing that I wish the movie had like expanded on was like the extra rations that the families got if they put their names in there, because like that's a very important part for like understanding exactly how like this society and the world works. You're poor, like, you know, you can starve or you can do this. And then also in Catching Fire, when they win and they talk about all of the perks that their district gets for like them being pictures. And like that's such like so interesting. I think that helps the world building so much, and that this wasn't ever expounded on like in the movies, which I thought was unfortunate.
I actually think part of what makes Catching Fire the best one out of all of them, in my opinion, is that I didn't remember this from originally reading it, but from going back and rereading it this week, I was paying attention. You only spend about 100 pages in the Hunger Games. The rest of the book is like in District 12 or like in the Capitol getting ready for the games. But you spend like half the book in District 12. And so really getting to like, see life and see like, as like things are getting harder for people and the Capitol's cracking down and like Katniss trying to figure out like what her, like if she's going to make a stand, what she's going to do, if she's going to run away, is really interesting.
Yeah.
I think it makes it an even stronger book versus Hunger Games where you spend like the majority of the book in the games.
We should like all reread it and then do a chat on it.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot to talk about here.
Except I don't want to reread Mockingjay. I'll reread the first two.
See, Mockingjay destroys you and it's terrible, but in my opinion, it's worth it. I saw earlier in Griswold said that she was listening to the audiobooks and just stopped when Katniss and Gale were heading to the presidential palace. And I get it, but also then you miss out on You Love Me, Real or Not Real, which is like
so good.
So good.
I know.
So good.
Destroyed me. Oh my god.
I was so mad at
affected me to this day.
Yeah.
I remember when I read it because I was on the bus on the way home because I was the child that didn't listen in class and just read all day long because I got it the night before. Like it had just come out. And I was like, okay, I'm going to read this all night. And then I had to go to bed. And then I went to school the next day. And as soon as I was done with anything, I was like, I'm reading this book. And so I got to that part on the bus. And my friend was like, why are you crying? And I was like, I just finished Mockingjay. And luckily she had read the Hunger Games series. She hadn't read that one yet because she didn't have it because it just came out the day before. And she was like, oh, okay. And I was just like sobbing on the way home.
No, that has impacted every YA novel I have written since. Just every single one is trying to capture that just a little bit, just the teensiest bit.
I really think this, like, while like obviously the romance is not the most important part of Hunger Games, I do think it's one of the best examples of a slow burn. Like she gets the slow burn right.
Yes.
And like it makes sense. You understand why Katniss like can't decide and can't commit and like can't fully love him and all these things. Like instead of like I feel like sometimes people try to write a slow burn, but it doesn't make sense why it's so slow a burn, you know? Like, but yeah, it's just.
I also feel like, especially for the time, Peeta was like a very unique love interest in that. Like, I mean, a lot of those love triangles were very like, you have the dark brooding one and you have the golden retriever boy. But even the golden retriever boys, like, just weren't Peeta. You know, like, they just weren't that soft. And so that's something that, like, even now I still really appreciate about him is that he is just, like, actually a very soft.
Just nice
boy.
So, yeah, I love Peeta. We were listening to the audiobook, like, I would literally, like, keep pausing it. And be like, oh my god, he is the sweet. He's so adorable and pure and just like the most wholesome. Like he is like the cinnamon roll boy archetype, like for sure. The boy with the bread.
I've been really surprised. I am only like a third of the way into the first one in a reread right now. The movies make it out to be like such a love triangle, whereas at least thus far, like it really hasn't been a love triangle at all.
Fire has like a decent bit of it, but it's never the focus. You know?
Yeah,
it's like odd that the movies I feel like emphasize the love triangle more, but also very much de-emphasized Katniss and Peeta's relationship. There's like a weird imbalance, you know. But yeah.
And maybe I need to rewatch them. I bet a ton of it was just how they marketed.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of on the tails of like Team Edward, Team Jacob. So like,
unless this turned into just a Hunger Games chat, in case we want to do that sometime too, because we really should do a whole chat on it sometime.
Sorry, you have been about to say something like 3 times ago.
No, I was just gonna say one series I was just thinking about. I was going to turn the subject to a different series, but I was just thinking about one that's surprising because of its longevity. Like it started during the Heyday and technically still continues, is Cassandra Clare's entire Shadowhunters universe.
She will never leave
like,
the world.
Yeah, it will never end. And it's like they're still selling well enough to keep going. Like it's very surprising that like it's just had like most YA franchises and series don't have that kind of longevity.
Most of them didn't try.
Yeah, true.
Most of I mean, it really was like, I don't think we can even appreciate now how deep of a chokehold the trilogy had. Like, to the point where it's like, I understand that if they had a good selling book, they wanted to sell 3 of them. And again, sometimes that didn't make sense and it should have been shorter. But it's also like, some of these you could have made longer. You could have done more of these and you just didn't because we did trilogies back then.
Yeah. And I feel like now, like years later, when so many authors who haven't gotten another big series are like going back to their YA Heyday series and writing another one, Cassandra Clare's just like stuck with it. Just like, I'm just going to keep going. Like, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
And so many of them had the classic love triangle in them too. She knew what the people wanted.
I think one of the interesting things with longer series in YA is there's this idea that like, well, if I start publishing a series, by the time it's over, like my readers are going to age out. And in some ways that maybe matters less than we think it does because early 20s older will still read and finish those series
Yeah.
probably if they
And
really
teenagers
like
will
them.
read books that came out 5 years ago, you know,
Right.
10 years ago.
Well, and I think if you are like a teenager and you discover a series and there's like 7 of them, you're like, all right, it's go time. I mean, and there have been like series that are like very long that, you know, kind of before the heyday, I think that was actually kind of a strategy. So I think like Pretty Little Liars, how many of those are there?
Long
So
series.
many of them.
So
But it
many
was like
seasons
tapping
on the
into that
show,
thing of
too.
like, if they find something they like, let's make a lot of them available, which
Yeah.
it's a good strategy sometimes that I think we've.
Yeah, that's definitely
Yes.
how I read in middle grade, of like the babysitter's little sister.
Oh, yeah.
There's I can't remember which other ones, but like I was just reading nonstop the same books for a year.
Boxcar Children read some.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it also is like pre-YA heyday, like books were allowed to be mid-list and now they like can't be. And they were allowed to be mid-list and continue to get sequels. Like I think about, speaking of long series, there was the Pendragon series by DJ McHale. It's 10 books.
I've been thinking about that this whole freaking
10 books. And it wasn't a huge blockbuster. It was not that popular. I knew like 2 other people who read them. One of them was Megan.
I was one of them.
Because I recommend one was the friend who recommended it to me, and the other was the friend I recommended it to, Megan. But 10 books. Yeah, 10 books.
Is it time for my rant?
I'm so ready. Rant.
Yeah, for me, I think what really killed the YA heyday is not that, like, you know, in some ways, like, it's going to ebb and flow. Like, public interest in a given age category, genre, whatever, is going to ebb and flow. But I think that there was, like, just so much effort to, like, find the next big thing. Everyone wanted the next Hunger Games. Everyone wanted the next... And I feel like I touched on this, like, when we talk about, like, TV and movies, too. But just, like, there was this era where everyone was trying to find the next big thing. Some of it was fairly successful. None of it was as big. And then they just pushed so hard into those things that they just leaned so hard into dystopia. They leaned so hard into paranormal romance and sometimes neglected building up other sort of things. And at that same time, they were also giving a lot of, like, monstrously huge advances. And while I don't, like, want to say authors should get less money, like, it could have been more strategic, I think. Like, let's not put all of our eggs in this one basket and then stop publishing that entire genre when it doesn't pan out, right? Because that's, I feel like, what has happened a lot. Yeah, so TLDR on the rant is just that we started focusing so much, I say we, the publishing industry, the capitalists, on trying to find the next big thing and just didn't nurture the mid list and build from the ground up. And I feel that way about books. I feel that way about movies. I feel that way about TV. And it's a shame because I think you really need a strong mid list in order for other stuff. I mean, for the whole ecosystem to survive, but also to get those big hits a lot of times. Okay.
I think for me, kind of spinning off of what you'd said and like where things started to go wrong was the intersection of like having those book series that publishers were going on and all in on, and then like BookTube and Book Talk, and like starting to feel like I was being marketed to all the time and being told what I should think the next big thing was, and never really knowing like, are people really loving this book, or is it just am I being influenced? Like I can't tell anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like along with the push to find the next big thing was also this like huge push to find the next big debut author too. Like it had to be a debut author. And it's interesting because I think when we look back at all these series and we're talking about like which ones we feel like have held up the best, the 2 main ones we've agreed on have been Hunger Games and the Raven Boys, both of which were not debut authors. They were like established mid-list authors who like were experienced and knew their craft, and those books have held up better than a lot of the like debut books where they were like under a huge amount of pressure, not very experienced, trying to like pull off this like huge blockbuster trilogy.
Yeah.
Not even to mention the whole trying to find like the 20-year-old wonderkind like author, you know. Yeah.
Or even just like the pressure on those authors once they got not even like top of the game big, but like the follow-up series from so many of these authors, and like nothing ever really feeling like the first one, and it just always just this cycle of like, oh, we're just not getting that back. These next series aren't going to be the same thing, but there's all this like hype around like whatever Veronica Roth did after. All of them have just these other series that I wanted to get into and just couldn't.
Yeah. I think in part too, there's that element of like, oh, well, I have to do something really different now.
Yeah.
So I'm not just known.
And that was like the idea was, oh, I have to do something different now. So it's not just this, but redo. And it's like, we wanted what you did before, but redone.
Look at Cassandra Clare once again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also there was maybe a little bit of a movement as it became a bigger genre. It wanted to be taken more seriously. And there's absolutely a place for like more serious YA, but I think that was a detriment to a lot of the genre fiction in particular, that they wanted it to be more serious and more elevated. And it's like, oh, no, sometimes we're just coming for the fun and games. Let the fun and games thrive.
Yeah. And I don't think it's a coincidence either that a lot of these things coincided with these big like pushes for the age category not to be so straight and white. And then they were like, let's throw a few big advances at more diverse authors and then not give them any support and be like, well, we tried.
Andrew Walker
When it
just brought up
didn't do
Children of Blood and
Really?
Bone in the comments. Yeah,
Yes,
Andrew said,
exactly.
this chat just makes me think about the pressure that was put on Children of Blood and Bone to bring back the Heyday that
Yeah.
it could not have lived up to.
Yeah, no way.
And that was one of the ones for me that I never even read because I felt so marketed to on that one of like, everyone is telling me this is the next big thing even before it's out. So this
What
feels-
it was a very young author being
it.
thrown like
Yeah.
into the deep end of publishing.
Yeah. Yeah, I really liked that book and it was just yeah.
I feel like I would have enjoyed it even more if, like Kelly said, I hadn't been like told like this has to be the next big thing, you know, like it put so much pressure on it even as a reader.
Yeah. Yes, Nicole said, am I the only one who does not trust book blurbs that call themselves the book talk sensation? Yeah.
100%. Go into any bookstore, there's like a viral table.
Books that are, yeah. As I say, I have a really hard time reading books that people are like, oh my gosh, like this is the best book ever. You've got to read it. Like I've had Fourth Wing forever and like started it like 6 times. And I'm just like, it's not that it's not good. It's just like, I don't want to read this. Everyone is reading this. I don't want to read it.
I feel like in some ways when Book Talk first started, I've never really engaged with Book Talk. But in some ways when it first started, it was just like a very homegrown sort of like people just talking about books they loved. And then it became a marketing tool. And when it's just like, hey, I'm here talking to you about things I love, then I actually do trust those recommendations quite a bit. But the more publishing attempts to tap into it as like, we're going to use this as a tool to market, the less I trust
it. It's never worked before. Why would you ruin this good thing? This is just a fun fact that I've been thinking about this whole time, but we've been talking about like trilogies and stuff. And I learned last year, that Twilight was only supposed to be a duology.
Oh,
yeah, I think I knew that.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be Twilight and then Forever Dawn, and books 2 and 3 were not supposed to happen, and there was no love triangle.
Yeah,
and
she was going to get turned into a vampire in the second one.
She's going to get pregnant in the second one, like the wedding and everything. And then Jacob, he was just going to be like, he was a character, but not a huge one. And then he was just going to imprint on her. And they were like, Stephanie, no.
This is part of why I get annoyed when I feel like Twilight's one of those ones where there's like, now there's so much like lore around it. There's also like urban legends almost about it, you know?
The My Chemical Romance one.
No, I was gonna say I get annoyed when people talk about Stephanie Meyer being like a creepy or weird person because she named Jacob after one of her brothers. They're like, oh, that's so gross. She named one of the love interests after her brother. It's like, well, he wasn't supposed to be a love interest when she named him.
Yeah.
How do you guys think Children of the Moon is going to do if it ever actually comes out?
don't know what that
Is
is.
that
No,
the sequel to Children of
It's
One?
the
Yeah, that's the
Renesmee.
sequel. Like that's like
Yeah.
or I think it's like childhood. Yeah, it's the Renesmee story.
Oh, that's my story.
Yeah.
It's like
They like
supposed to be
announced that
about-
she was gonna do it, but then there hasn't been any updates.
Yeah, it like takes place with like Renesmee's first time in high school with her parents. You know, all normal things.
Honestly, I'd probably read it just because I can't resist a sensation.
I love, there's this TikToker whose name I can't remember, but she's a woman in her 40s, brunette, talks about Twilight exclusively.
Oh, I know
So,
who you're talking about.
Yeah, if you've seen
Talks about
any,
like Bella's outfits and stuff. Yeah.
I love hearing her talk about Renesmee and just the fact that like the book Stephanie writes would probably never ever do this, but the fact that like really Renesmee would have to just resent her parents so much because Stephanie goes so out of her way in the books to make it so that like Edward is making sure this child knows that Bella is the most beautiful woman in the world and that he loves Bella more than he loves her. And like, how do you not end up resenting that? And like, she's so isolated to the point that Jacob is like the only non-family member she's talking to, and fascinating. I'm gonna
And
find
like,
her.
and her aunt Rosalie like is very much sees her as the child she couldn't have.
Yes.
You know? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all of the Jacob.
Yeah, I'm sure
stuff,
she won't
really,
go in that.
like, everyone just knows who she's gonna end up with.
Yeah. There are
I
so
don't know.
many.
I feel like they're gonna like subvert that and be like she doesn't end up with Jacob romantically because
I'm sure they're trying to make it a lot.
But she doesn't want to.
yeah, but then
I mean, it
like,
could be
of
a
course
really
Jacob is
interesting
the only
book
one
if that's right.
ever
Mhm.
whose imprint like is like nah, thank you.
And I just said that you said earlier about you can't resist a sensation. I actually think we have gotten very good at resisting sensations. Now there are TikTok books, and everyone's like, "This is actually the next big thing," and we're all just like, "No, we're not going to do that."
See, that I can resist, but if it was like the Renesmee book, I'd probably have to read that. Although I did resist reading Bout of Songbirds and Snakes until this year, so I guess maybe I can't resist some things. But
Yeah, I didn't read Midnight Sun. I read like 10 pages and I was like, I can't do it. I'm so sorry. Her name is Sarah Gallagher, the creator on TikTok who I love. I love talking like critically too about like all this stuff and how it shaped everything. I think it's so interesting.
Yeah. We should definitely do a Twilight Saga chat.
we need like a Twilight chat and a Hunger Games chat.
I just want to talk about like all of the problematic things in Twilight now that we're all adults. And
As Emma was talking, I just like with like three things just immediately. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially into the fourth book, it's like this is a horror novel. Like this is horrific.
It's also just very racially problematic in several ways.
Oh,
and
really?
it's
just real
age
bad.
gap weirdness. I mean, like the Edward Bella age gap, but also like the imprinting age gaps are awkward and weird.
And when you think about imprinting generally, it's so horrific. Neither of them have any say in it. Like even the person imprinting, that is a horror story. Like you don't want that, and then suddenly like I could talk about it for so long.
But yet it's like a whole trope in like paranormal romance. Like it's a whole thing. Like crazy.
Nicole asked, do you think the Twilight TV series is actually going to happen? I just heard about it this week. I had not heard about it, so I don't know.
I hope not. I've heard about it a lot.
Why mess with perfection?
A lot of people are saying that Jenna Ortega should play Bella in that. I can't remember what his name is. The guy from The Kissing Booth.
Jacob Elordi. No, it's not Jacob Elordi.
Yes, Jacob Elordi. Jacob Elordi should be
Edward. Would be a good Edward.
And
but I just can't see Jenna Ortega as
just being like,
I almost said as Kristen Stewart as
I don't know. They said the same thing about Harry Potter. I don't know. I want to say no, but also I know Hollywood is getting greedy and they really like to greenlight things that are
It's like with
exciting.
the Harry Potter series happening, I could see a Twilight TV series possibly.
All the problematic things we're talking about are so much harder to like plot, just skate around.
Yeah.
I think Harry Potter will flop. I think that the reboot series will flop pretty hard. I just, no one asked for this.
That will determine whether like the Twilight
And
TV series.
I think because it flops, I don't think they'll do Twilight. Because they'll be like, this isn't what
I hope that
I think
dispels the notion.
the thing
of any
Hollywood is
reboots like
struggling
that.
with right now is that nostalgia is only good in small doses.
Mhm.
And I just feel like the only things that I have been fed for like the past 5 years from Hollywood is an attempt to tap into my nostalgia and like
Reboots.
Nope.
I hate
So many.
reboots, franchises. I mean, I'll maybe give a little more grace to like a franchise like the Barbie movie, just because it still felt like a little fresh. But I'm just or like the Dungeons and Dragons movie. Like, yes, this is
I
a
love the Dungeons and
franchise,
Dragons.
but
Yeah.
it didn't feel like something
It's
I'd
not
already
like a
seen.
straight reboot.
Yeah.
No, we should also do a reboot chat because I have
Yes.
lots
This
of
whole-
feelings.
this
And there's
whole
so many to choose
conversation-
from.
This whole
And, like, some
conversation
are
has
good
just
and
made
some
me
are
mad
not.
about capitalism and just yeah.
The amount of, I mean, we all know that Disney is like a king of reboots.
Oh, yeah.
Just,
I did watch the first episode of Percy Jackson today, though, finally.
I was about to say, like, it's an interesting topic because, like, some are good and some are not, and some are, like, warranted and some are not. And I feel like Percy Jackson was warranted because previous adaptation.
very warranted.
So,
Very, very warranted.
yeah. Or the City of Bones movie. How a bummer.
Every time I think of that movie, I just laugh because I remember, like, me and my friend watched it the day it came out because there was a theater like right by our high school, and we were like, we walked to the theater from from the school because we were like, we gotta go see it, and we were like the only people in the theater because it was like 3:20 showing, and we could not take the whole movie seriously. Like, great memories of seeing the movie, but not because it was good.
Yeah.
To this day, we still laugh about the like greenhouse scene or like the stairwell kiss.
All the time.
To this day, we still crack up about it.
Yeah. Andrew said, is anyone writing down these chat ideas? We never remember these later. No.
As Andrew said that.
We should, because I don't think we have like anything planned.
Well, every other week we do.
I don't think we have any non-productivity chats planned for 2024.
Nicole says, I think we've all read books recently that we would love to see made into TV series instead of revisiting stories
Yes.
this already on the rights to. Yes, please.
Yeah.
And that's what I meant of like like making adaptations of things without making like trying to pull in the audience. Like, just find good source material and make new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that like Max is actively canceling a bunch of stuff right now that was original. Like this week, they announced the cancellation of I think like 4 different things. They canceled Our Flag Means Death. They canceled Minx Max. It was on Max. It got canceled. They canceled Rap Shit, and they canceled The Flight Attendant. Like all 4, like pretty solid. I feel like original stuff.
I thought the flight attendant was doing well. That's so surprising.
It was.
Well, so was Our Flag Means Death.
So was Our Flag Means Death, and they canceled all of them within a week. And
That company, they do not know what they're doing. They're trying to reinvent
world
the wheel
is-
every year.
A mess, and I just need to realize someone should just put me in charge of deciding these
Yeah.
things. I'd make it better. I would make it perfect. I'm not that good, but I'd do better than the guys who are currently in charge. I'm pretty sure.
yeah.
I would trust you more for sure. Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
also the mind-blowing thing about how many terrible adaptations we got of like so many people could have done this better. Like so many of them were done with just like looking down on YA audiences and not making it so clear they don't think very highly of the people who enjoyed those stories originally.
Yeah.
Definitely not giving it any sort of budget.
And like made by like directors or producers that don't care
Yeah.
about the source material.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting
That's
because
the worst
wasn't the
thing.
first
Care
Twilight
about the
movie
source material.
kind of that way? It had a tiny budget,
Yeah.
and they
It
were
was
like,
woman
"We
directed
directed
it.
it." Yeah,
And then it
director
got
was
big.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they
And
said
then
a
it was
woman can
only
direct
men
a
directors.
blockbuster franchise.
They're like, that's enough women directors for this franchise now that it's a franchise.
Well, and I know I saw something that when Netflix released all of their viewing data, what they found was actually that like YA and female-led or like female-targeted series were like their bread and butter, right? Like it was
Teen
the
dramas
yeah, it was
were like super
Wednesday
high.
and Bridgerton and like
Ginny and Georgia.
Ginny and Georgia.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like this is a demographic that has money and spends it if you can figure out how to not mess it
Demographic
up.
that is
Like
so
instead-
passionate about the things they
Yeah.
love.
Mhm.
Instead, like all the money goes to like Stranger Things, which is great, but they put out like one season every 4 years. Like that's not making you a ton of money.
And no one wants, I'm sorry, so few people want season 5 now because they've taken so long.
Right?
I'm not going to say no one, but everyone I know is not that excited
Just
for
like,
season 5.
We should just be in charge of things.
We should be.
Agreed.
Well, that's what baffles me about some of these things is I feel like I talk to like any random person ever, just normal person, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm tired of all the reboots. I'm tired of like things getting canceled all the time." And I just do the people at the studios making these decisions not have Twitter? Do they not see people just saying this? How do you not know that this is how the public feels?
And it's not like there isn't plenty of stuff to make adaptations out there. I mean, like you look at The Last of Us, which is a game that's been out for a long time. It had a big fan base and the TV series was so good. It's like you don't need to just be making spin-offs of these huge franchises. There's plenty of stuff out there if for whatever reason you just can't support original work.
We've been going like actually over an hour at this point. Does anyone have any more like upbeat thoughts to round this out on?
I do think there is some correction happening in like I do see hints of the YA genre kind of coming back. And I think a lot of it is like just returning to some of its roots. I think romantasy is going to be really good for the YA genre. And maybe I'd say that biasly because I write and enjoy reading that, but I think yeah, just kind of finding ways to like regrow the mid list, like invest in some new types of stories. I'm cautiously optimistic, and I think that if we do see it come back, maybe not to what it was in the heyday, but at least to where it's a little more stable and thriving than it's been the past few years, I think it is going to be better because we have made other improvements, like we are diversifying, and we still have work to do there too, of course, but I'd love to get to where we have a lot of really fun stories in YA that are maybe not blockbusters, but there and available and told by a lot of different voices. So
Yeah.
This is kind of the opposite of rebuilding the mid list. Thinking about it, I feel somewhat confident that we will maybe see another Heyday at some point. There are so many people who would love to see it happen, and all it's going to take is the right story at the right time. It probably won't be the ones the publishers think it is, and it's just going to happen when it happens. But
Yeah, if we ever have another huge blockbuster book like some of these, I feel like it will be a surprise. You know, it'll be the book that like they don't expect.
Honestly, we're a little old now compared to the like we'll probably find out about it from the youths.
yeah,
Because that's the thing is like all these big Heyday ones, it was like there were teens and even young teens and adults reading it, and that's how you like really hit a blockbuster. At least then.
Nicole says these things ebb and flow. I'm not giving up on YA, just waiting to just waiting to enjoy it like I used to.
There's so much good YA out there, and every now and then I'm in just the right mood and I just read a bunch of them. I think I'm going to reread The Hunger Games, though, after this.
I think I'm gonna read. I've never read a Cassandra Clare book.
Really?
Yeah, I've also never read The Ugly, so maybe those will be my two like takeaways from.
I recommend The Uglies first, personally. But I wasn't a huge Cassandra Clare fan. I stopped after the second book, so
I think I liked the Clockwork ones a lot. I remember reading those in college and being like, "Oh, we've like leveled up here."
And this is unrelated, but I am also planning to watch The Mummy after this. So, for those of you keeping tabs on me attempting to watch movies that apparently I should have seen already.
Yeah, I need everyone to reread The Hunger Games and read About a Songbirds and Snakes so that we can discuss.
Excellent. Shout out.
The difference between like having read the selection series so close together and then going like, okay, how long do I need now to reread The Hunger Games? Because it's a lot longer than it used to be.
Well, there's two people watching. Shout out to Nicole and Andrew for hanging with us this whole time.
We will be back next week with a Nerd In productivity chat, the usual every other week shebang. So hopefully we will see you both then. I feel pretty good that we will. So you're wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you all so
Bye.
much. See you next time. Bye.